doing a great job at educating the consumers on what it takes to actually make products, support sustainability, what it takes to support regenerative.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Good Garbage Podcast. My name is Ved Krishna. My primary reason for existence has been to find ways to leave our wonderful planet cleaner. We will be speaking with material innovators, creators, and propagators to learn from them how we can build for scale and towards a regenerative future. Their stories will help us answer the big question, what is good garbage? It is not often that one gets to meet a person who has been behind building some of our favorite brands. This week, I get to chat with Keith Bearden, who is the CEO at Alter Eco Chocolates. But what makes this chat even more exciting is his journey of building amazing organizations like Yogi Tea and Earth Circle Organics, which we have all heard of. Keith's deep understanding and love for the food business and a passion for sustainability unlocks so much value and growth for all the businesses he touches. What makes his journey even more exciting for us is his clear understanding, focus, and promotion of regenerative packaging solutions. In this episode, we get to learn from a user perspective, and I emerged much richer in my understanding of the challenges that come in the way of scaling and wider adoption. Listen, learn, and enjoy. Hello, hello. We have Keith Bearden today in the house. Keith is the CEO of Alter Eco, a sustainable chocolate brand. And I was telling Keith how much I love their raspberry flavor just before we started this conversation. Thank you, Keith, for being on the show, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. I'm going to start at growing up on a beef farm and how that influenced your life choices, because that seems to be like a common thread through your life, sustainable farming and that sort of thing. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, that's true. I did grow up on a farm. We raised beef cattle. We also raised some cash crops way back in the day. And I think growing up on a farm taught me a number of things. One, hard work, because farming is hard work for sure. It wasn't so much what led me into the food and beverage industry. Right out of college, I went to work for the Dow Chemical Company, which was kind of a big deviation from farming. Although Dow has a very large agricultural division and produces pesticides and herbicides that are used in farming, globally. But it was after I left Dow that my wife and I decided to move to Portland, Oregon by choice. And we said, let's go live where we want to live and we'll find a job later. While we were in Portland, I started my own consulting company because I had a lot of experience from Dow. I spent 8 of the 15 years at Dow as an internal auditor. And so I learned how to evaluate and assess companies and make recommendations for improvements. And so I started my own company really focused on helping small to mid-sized businesses become more operationally efficient, utilize technology better, things of that nature. And if you know anything about the Pacific Northwest of the United States, it's very entrepreneurial, and there's a lot of food and beverage companies. And so a big part of my clientele in my consulting company was actually food and beverage. And that's how I got into food and beverage. And I was fortunate enough to have one of my personal clients was a tea company called Yogi Tea, an herbal tea company. And so I worked with Yogi as a consultant for a couple of years. And then they asked me to take over their international operation. So I sold my consulting company and moved to Hamburg, Germany, and ran the international operations for Yogi Tea for almost 7 years. And I've been in food and beverage ever since then.
Did you know we are based in Portland, Oregon? Alex and me both.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
We are based there. Of course, right now I'm recording from India, where we have some of our operations. But that's where we live, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And we have lots and lots of friends. I'm part of the entrepreneurs organization, so I have
Hmm.
lots of friends in the food and beverage business, and I support some of them. You know, these young startups. There's a really nice kombucha company,
Yeah.
and a few of my other friends have. There's a great, I don't know if you know Nossa Familia, which is again a great coffee company, and
Hmm.
again farm to table kind of people. But yeah, very very. I can imagine how that had an impact on you because it's so organic and sustainable,
Exactly.
in their being. Yeah.
I mean, I worked with Dave's Killer Bread. I
Oh
worked
yeah.
with Yoshida Sauces. I worked with Oregon Naturals. I mean, it was just that, and you build that network within that food and beverage industry. And then after I ran Yogi Tea International for almost 7 years and came back to the States, I was just knee deep into that network. And so I've been in food and beverage ever since then and largely focused on organics and sustainable businesses.
Yeah, and I'm going to get into Yogi as well because that's another brand I love. But like, I know that you started converting your farm to organic and regenerative at one point, and I asked that also from personal interest. I'm actually sitting on a permaculture in between a permaculture orchard right now, so
Okay.
it's of course personal interest as well. So, would love to hear more about that journey.
Yeah. So when we came back to the US from Germany, we settled in Georgia originally, and I ran a company that was a beverage contract manufacturing company called Beverage House. We sold it to Dueller, which is a very large German conglomerate, global company headquartered out of Darmstadt, Germany. And I ran that company for a couple of years and helped them build out the US market. That was their first entry into the US market. But it was big corporate. I wanted to get out of big corporate like I did out of Dow and back into some of the smaller entrepreneurial companies. But in the meantime, we decided that we would move back to the family farm. The family farm's been in my family since the early 1800s. And so my dad's health had gotten not great, and he wasn't really able to maintain the farm in the way that it needed to be. And so my wife and I moved back to the farm, and we restored the farm, started restoring the farm. We started with all new fencing, and we restored the original log cabin that was built pre-Civil War. So we took it all the way down to the ground and put it all the way back up. And then we started working on how do we get the farm to be more self-sustaining and regenerative, because I had been in the food industry doing this. And so we started out with doing soil samples and figuring out what we needed in terms of grasses to nourish the soil from an organic matter perspective. And then we started improving the herd and the livestock. And then about 3 or 4 years into that, my daughter and son-in-law decided that they were wanted to move outside of Nashville. They were living in Nashville and they wanted to move out of Nashville. So we encouraged them to move to the farm, and they took over the farm about 4 years ago, I guess. And they have really made significant progress and strides. They've gone to a rotational structure with the cattle. So they keep the cattle on a very small plot, and every 3 days they move them. So they don't need fertilizer because the cow manure becomes fertilizer. And if you keep the cows in a small space, they'll trample it up and break it up, and it'll defoliate into the soil. You get the dung beetles involved, and it really composts the soil. They also eat down the grasses, so you don't have to worry so much about herbicides, because if you keep the grasses short, they'll eat everything, including the weeds. And so weeds have a tough time coming back if they don't get to grow and seed out. So this has become a process now. They move the cattle every 3 days. And what's happened is the other ecosystems around the farm have come back for the first time in probably 20 years. There's wild turkey, and there's more frogs than there ever have been. There's quail. There's all kinds of wildlife now that has come back to the farm because there's an ecosystem to support it.
Yeah, and we noticed the same thing, like again, very similar to your story. My wife is American and we imported her to India and for a bit, and then we moved into the farm. And again, my father had planted an orchard, but he never lived on the farm. So eventually, when we came in and we started turning it to regenerative and permaculture oriented, we saw so much wildlife come in, and
Mhm.
just the quantum of birds and animals just became amazing. So it's been a real treat to watch that. And I'm going to switch gears here just to keep on with your story. So why computer science? From a farm boy to computer science, that's a big leap.
Well, it's interesting. I actually wanted to be an attorney. And I was in high school, my senior year of high school. You meet with the guidance counselor and, you talk about what your next moves are. And this was way back in 1979. And so I'm meeting with the guidance counselor, and I remember this as clear as it was yesterday. Mrs. Abernathy, she said, "So, Keith, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Well, Miss Abernathy, I want to be an attorney." And she said, "No, there's way too
That's
many
awesome.
lawyers." She said, "There's way too many lawyers in the world as there is as it is." She said, "You are brilliant in math and science, and computers are the future. You need to major in computer science." And I said, "I don't know anything about computers." She said, "Nobody does. That's the point. Be on the cutting edge." so, so I went to college and I started out. I'm like, computers, I don't know. And so I started out kind of dual track engineering, computer math, and I hated engineering classes and I loved the computer science classes. And so I wound up with a double major in computer science and math.
I have the exact opposite story of you. So I started my junior year in high school choosing physics, chemistry, maths, computers because I wanted to be an Air Force pilot and you needed science. And then
Mhm.
I got some power in my eyes during that year. And my principal literally called me and he said, "Son, spare yourself. Go and do something else." So I actually switched. My junior year was in sciences and my senior year was in commerce. So I made a switch and this I said, "That is true. I do not understand anything of physics. I better get out of this now that I can." So it was the opposite story. So taking this forward, what taught you as an internal auditor? Because Dow is a huge company, and I'm sure there was a reason they chose you for this job. Because, again, as far as I understand, internal audit is to fundamentally keep the system solid and to make sure that things are in good shape. So, what were those teachings in those years that you've carried with yourself?
It's interesting. I always told people that Dow was the type of company that they were very, very good at training their internal employees. And they would also give you enough rope to do one of two things: hang yourself or tie up a really pretty bow. And if you tied up a really pretty package, they just give you more rope. And so I was very fortunate enough when I joined the company in the IT department, and Dow was a very early adopter of technology. And so I had technology experience that most of the people there didn't have because I was fortunate enough to have a full 4 year degree of pure computer science. Where I went to university at Austin Peay State University in Tennessee, the director of the computer science department was actually he was a PhD computer science person, but he wasn't a full-time professor for the most part. He was actually on loan to the university from NASA. And so he had worldly experience. And so he brought real practical world experience to the classroom. And so when I got out of college with that experience, I even had exposure to things like artificial intelligence back in the early 80s. And so I got put on a very large project for Dow that was involved with processing literally millions and millions and millions of records of data. And because of the technology that I had learned at university, I was able to write systems to do that. And so, very successful. So then I got approached by the audit department that said, "Hey, we would love to bring you into the audit department because we're now relying on technology so much to run the company. We need to start getting deeper into the audit part of IT." So I joined the audit department. Auditing is it's a grueling job. We had 42 auditors, I think, in the company. And at the time, Dow had manufacturing operations in 68 different countries. And there were 42 of us. And by the edict of the board, we were required to audit every facility at least once every 3 years. So as an auditor, you signed up to travel approximately 40 weeks a year.
Wow.
And that wasn't travel that, you were coming home on the weekends. It was, you're going to Brazil for 5 weeks, or you're going to Japan for 6 weeks, or you're going to Malaysia, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and Seoul for 8 weeks. I mean, it was grueling. And it was designed to be a 3-year rotation because most people couldn't handle that kind of travel for, a large part of their career. And all the auditors were located at the headquarters office in Midland, Michigan. And as an internal auditor, our job was to make sure that not only were internal controls in place, but to make sure that the external auditors didn't find anything. Because Dow's a publicly traded company. You don't want your external auditors coming in and saying, "Oh, your internal controls are a mess. Oh, you don't have control over your operations. Oh, your quality has problems." So we audited literally everything. I was primarily focused on technology, but we audited things like physical security. We'd walk around the fence of the plant and make sure there were no holes in the fence. I mean, we looked at everything. And so in doing that, you learn a lot about the financials, you learn a lot about organizational structure, separation of duties, corporate governance. I mean, you really learn how to run a business. You see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when we found something, it was our job to make recommendations for improvements. And then the recipient, the auditee, they had to respond to our recommendations and actually execute against them. And then we would go back and do follow-up audits to make sure that they did it right. Like I said, it was a 3-year rotation, and all of our auditors were located in Midland, Michigan. 2.5 years into my rotation, I was approached by the corporate auditor, and they said, "We've been doing a lot of analysis, and more than 30% of our revenue comes out of Europe. And we don't feel like we're giving Europe enough audit time to make sure that things are under control. So we're going to open an audit department in Antwerp, Belgium. And if you're interested, we would send you over there as the European audit manager." And I said, "Sign me up." So I moved to Antwerp, Belgium for 5 years. So I spent 5 more years in auditing.
That's an amazing story. And you got a lot of mussels, fries, and beer.
Actually, the funny thing is, yes, but I became allergic to mussels while I was living
Oh
in Belgium.
no.
Never
Bad
had been
timing.
allergic to them at all. And then one night, my wife and I were out having mussels and beer, and my throat started swelling, and I
Oh
haven't
no.
been able to eat
Yeah.
them since then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember I did my undergrad in London, and there was this very wonderful Belgian restaurant called Belgo's, and all the people would dress as monks. and they would serve the monk, different 100 different flavors of beer.
Yep.
And there at that time, I'm vegan now, but at that time I was eating everything, and their wild boar sausages were to die for. I still remember that. So yeah, and of course, as auditors, you don't make that many friends.
Yeah.
So I guess it is the 42 of you that hang
Yeah.
out together.
Yeah, it's funny. I had one of the auditees. He came, we went in and he said, "You auditors, you're the worst. You come in after the battle and kill the wounded." I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "We're both being paid by the same company. My job is to help you protect your job because you don't want the external auditors finding what we find."
Absolutely. And I'm glad your teacher was so right about your computer degree that, that it was so sought after. And I'm really surprised when you said that in the 80s you were thinking about AI. Of course, I'm still kind of grappling with what it is, but but it's amazing that the idea existed even then. So just switching tracks, of course, you talked about living in Oregon.
Mhm.
And you talked a little bit about entrepreneurship. Tell me more. What drew you to becoming an entrepreneur? Because that's a different ball game, and it
It,
takes its toll.
it is. When I first moved to Oregon, I got a job with one of the largest dental equipment manufacturers in the U.S., located in Newburgh. So if you're in Portland, you know where Newburgh is. And so we actually lived out in Newburgh, and beautiful country, by the way. And so it was a family owned business, a big company for a small industry. It was about 1,200 employees, and I was the chief administrative officer. So I had IT and finance and regulatory and legal, all those types of things. But I always felt like I could help other companies, So I was in a couple of different organizations, like I was in the Society of Information Management, I was in the Oregon Technology Advisory Board. And so I started like mentoring and coaching a lot of these smaller startup companies, especially through the Oregon Technology Advisory Board. And I thought, well, wait a minute, there's a business here. Maybe it would be fun to work with these smaller companies. I love teaching. I was an adjunct professor at Saginaw Valley State University when I lived in Michigan. I've been an adjunct professor at Austin P, where I went to undergraduate school. So, I mean, I love teaching. And so I just ventured out and hung out my shingle. And the name of the company was VIE, Virtual Information Executives. It still exists today. I built it up to about 12 consultants. It started out, it was just me. And within about 6 months or so, I had more work than I could do. And so I hired a guy he was at Portland State. He was the chief technology officer at Portland State. And he's Indian as well, by the way. His name is Manoj Garg. And he came in with me and we built the company up to be a very sizable organization. And he's the one I sold the company to, and he's still running it today.
That's a small world. So in India, so I don't know how much you've heard of this, but as soon as we hear a name, we can pigeonhole the person. So so so, so Manoj Garg, the Garg name is from a business community.
Okay.
So if you didn't know that, now you know that, as soon as you know that, yeah, like we can segregate that he comes from this kind of community.
Okay.
So it's you chose well, is what I'm trying to say that,
Yeah,
he
no,
had it in his blood.
he's done very well with the business, and I'm very happy for him. I loved consulting. It was great because you got such a variety of industries that you could work in. Like I said, I wound up mostly in food and beverage, which I love the food and beverage space today, and don't see myself really doing anything else. I'm getting to the point where at some point I might consider retiring, but people tell me all the time, "Oh, when are you going to retire?" And I'm like, I don't know. I love what I do. I mean, I have fun with what I do, so why stop?
No, that's awesome. What I'm noticing when I was looking at the list of companies that you worked for, especially in the food and beverage
Mhm.
space, a common trend, and I guess my eye goes to this area of packaging immediately. And I'm going to start with Yogi Tea because Yogi Tea is one of my favorites. Again, I love that throat comfort, and it really
Mhm.
helps me. My throat is much better drinking it, and one of my friends introduced me to it, and he still each time he meets me, he'll give me a box of throat comfort. So or lemon ginger, those two, and what I've noticed is that their packaging is always seems to be more sustainable than the others. Is that a conscious choice that the company made? Was it very sustainability oriented? How did that whole idea transpire?
Yeah, no, well, with Yogi, yes, it's always been committed to that. I mean, we always wanted to have always 100% organic, always sustainable packaging. We moved away from even the shrink or the cellophane on the boxes because we were able to get a better barrier for the tea bags themselves with the packaging. And so we moved to a NatureFlex packaging that was compostable, and it was always a conscious decision. I mean, we wanted to eliminate the waste associated with our products. And same at Alter Eco. At Alter Eco, I mean, even our little truffle wrappers are backyard compostable. We're the only brand in the entire world that has that on their truffle wrappers. And not because others couldn't do it, they could, they just choose not to.
Yeah, I think and we're going to get more into the alter ego story for sure. But of course, it's the cost idea,
Hmm.
and of course, I've had lots of people on the show who are so passionate, and there's this wonderful bread company called Pacha, and their founder was on the show, and she said, so I said, what's the difference in the cost? And she said, oh, don't even ask me. So, but the difference ultimately, the difference was in cents, right? It was
It
maybe
is.
5x, but
Hmm.
cents. So
Hmm.
she said, how does it really matter? And I'm going to stick to my idea because somebody else is packing in this. And she went down to, even the clip on the compostable bag was a cardboard clip, not
Hmm.
even a plastic clip. So very similar to what you're saying. But staying with Yogi Tea, what I've also noticed, a lot of the tea companies have gone to a poly-based tea bag, but at least
Hmm.
the Yogi tea still seems to be a baka or a natural
It
structure.
is.
But that creates its own challenges, right? Because they cannot heat seal, and they're trying PLA and stuff like that.
Yep.
So again, talk to us a little more about that. And again, how much does it matter? Because people are going to throw away tea bags, and they're going to be poly, and maybe people don't know that.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the tea bag that Yogi uses is a folded paper tea bag. And, that does present challenges. However, I will say the machinery, the EMA machines that we used are very, very efficient. When I was running the international operation, we upgraded all of our machinery to move away from even the staple in the tea bag. So it's actually a threaded, not the machine. Tea bag machines are fascinating. I love production. I love manufacturing. So you can imagine a tea bag machine. You've got the tea bag, the paper, the filter paper rolling in, and it's on a flat roll. It rolls in. The tea bag machine doses the tea into the tea bag itself, and we're talking about 2 grams of product. So it's very accurate dosing. Then the machine folds the paper, folds it again, it threads the string through there, ties a knot in it, cuts it, picks up a tag, threads the string through the tag, ties a knot in it, cuts it, layers that tag over on the tea bag, puts it in an envelope, which is heat sealed, by the way. And then the envelope gets heat sealed and goes into a box, and there's 15 to 18 tea bags in a box. It does all that at about 350 to 400 tea bags a minute. It's
Wow.
it's running so fast you can't see it. There's cameras on it that actually film it so that if something goes wrong, the technicians have to play it back in slow motion to see what actually happened. It's amazing. I love
Yeah,
watching.
it's
I love
incredible.
watching production machinery. It's so much fun. But it we made that commitment. That upgrade of that machinery to get away from the staple was $1 million per line.
Wow.
And we ran 10 lines.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that
So,
takes solid commitment. And of course, not just that, when I look at if you were to go to a kind of polyester thread, kind of,
mhm,
even each tea bag, I'm
mhm.
sure it would be significantly cheaper.
Oh,
But there is a
absolutely.
choice that the company makes that you're going to use a natural paper or alpaca-based non-woven. And
Absolutely.
that's a very different structure in itself. So it's a commitment to a certain cause. What about the envelope? Does that have a polyethylene lining, or even they've managed to remove that too?
No, it does. I mean, the envelope is recyclable, it's not compostable.
Yeah, yeah. But that's still a step in a. At least it'll be paper recyclable and not poly recyclable, which in
Yeah.
itself is at
Yeah,
least a step
exactly.
in the right direction.
Exactly. I mean, there are certain things where you just have to you have to protect the integrity of the product for the
Yeah,
consumer, and you want, I mean, tea typically has a shelf life of 2 to 3 years, and you want the product to be, in Yogi's case, not only taste good, but also continue to be efficacious because all of Yogi's products have some efficacy associated with the product.
absolutely. Yeah, and I guess it needs both a water vapor and an oxygen barrier because you
It
have
does.
aroma as well. And I think those are tough things
Oh,
to get. We've been working on it for a while, and we know how challenging it is.
aromas are interesting because we use, you mentioned lemon ginger, and that was one of our biggest sellers in Europe. And that plus anything that had our orange aromas in it, orange peel in it, we had to actually let those sit out for a few days to be able to let some of the aroma escape. Because if you didn't, it would start eating away at the packaging.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just and what is it in the aroma? Is it the
It's the
gas that
oil.
it reduces? It's the
Yeah.
oil.
Yeah. It's the
Ah,
oil.
that would be it. That's so interesting. I've never heard of that. Would love to learn more. And then I look at, again, a couple of companies that you worked with. Earth Circle, again, products that I've used, very, again, sustainability oriented. I don't know Sweet by Nature so much, but I love Rooibos, and of course, Honeybush is similar. So,
Mhm.
so again, those two seem to be in a similar direction. Is that a conscious choice, or they just started knowing that Keith is a good guy to get in?
A lot of it was that they reached out to me, but I also wouldn't I wouldn't go and support a company that was doing something that's counterintuitive to who I am. And so Earth Circle Organics was an interesting company. It was predominantly focused on superfoods that are sold into the nutraceutical space. And so a lot of our customers were the nutraceutical industry that was looking for natural and organic ingredients. And we were importing and processing and selling those ingredients. Sold that business to Cambridge Commodities, a UK based company, and stayed on for about a year and a half, 2 years. The company was located in California, and I was traveling. At that time, I was living in Tennessee, where I am today, and I was traveling
Yeah,
back and forth
that's
to
across the
California.
country.
Yeah, I was traveling back and forth to California a lot. And Cambridge acquired another California-based company, and so that they had an existing CEO at that company, and so that allowed me to transition out. And when I did that, actually, I had met the group Advantage Capital through the sale process of Earth Circle Organics. So when we were selling Earth Circle Organics, Advantage Capital was one of the potential acquirers. They were very interested in the company. And they obviously didn't get it. We sold it to Cambridge, but I met the team at Advantage Capital. And so when I left Cambridge, I had reached out to them and said, hey, leaving Cambridge. If you got anything interesting, let me know. And that's when I went in and started running American Botanicals. And American Botanicals, again, focused on natural organic ingredients, a lot of US domestic products like slippery elm bark and golden seal root and ginseng root and echinacea and all these products that are a lot of them domestically and even wild harvested still. And then we imported a lot of products as well. And so they brought me in. The company had been kind of flatline in terms of growth, also flatline or declining a little bit in terms of profitability. So they brought me in and asked me to kind of turn it around. And I joined the company in February of 2020, and then boom, COVID.
Difficult to turn around stuff during COVID for sure.
Well, actually, our sales skyrocketed because we were selling into the nutraceutical
Ah,
industry.
yeah, health food,
We were
health
selling,
supplements, not even food.
yeah, we were selling echinacea and red beetroot powder and all these things that went into autoimmune supplements. And we owned a sister company called Aloha Medicinals, which harvested, and processed medicinal mushrooms. Our sales skyrocketed.
You
Mushroom
were like,
sales
look
went
at
up
me. You asked me to turn
200%.
it around, and look what I did. Caused havoc all around this world. Thanks to me wanting to turn you around.
Yeah. Yeah. Mushroom sales went up like 300% that year. It was crazy.
Wow.
But I mean, I did a lot there in terms of improving the operations. They had 3 manufacturing facilities, and I'm an operations guy. I looked at that and said, okay, this one facility's doing about 4.5 million pounds. This other facility's doing about a million and a half pounds. The one that's doing 4.5 million pounds is only operating at about 65% capacity. I can drop this million and a half pounds in here, be more efficient, run operations longer, and close down this facility altogether and save a couple $1 million. That was one of the changes that I made.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to hear these stories, and each one of them has, so many intricacies, within them to be able to really understand what happened. And it's always only visible on hindsight, right? When you're doing it, you're doing it. It's
Yeah.
one day at a time, and let's see what happens. We would like to take a minute to thank our sponsors. Good Garbage is sponsored by Packer, a family of brands that produces compostable packaging and works to implement regenerative solutions. Packer's new project is to bring compostable food serviceware and food carry products to the North American marketplace. Learn more at packer.com. Now back to the conversation. Let's now move to the meat and potatoes, Alter Echo. And tell us the story of Alter Echo, because it seems to be two very interesting founders, and, how did it come about? And then, of course, we'll transition into you coming into it. But tell us about Alter Echo and what was the whole idea behind it.
Yeah. So, Matthew and Edward were very entrepreneurial. They're French. And actually Alter Eco started in France. And so they had, done their research. They had been and visited some of the farms in Latin America, and they wanted to find a way to help the farmers and build a sustainable business and supply chain with local farmers and small farm holders, in Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Dominican Republic, all those regions. And some of the first products were quinoa and rice and coffee. They weren't chocolate necessarily. Chocolate came along later, only a couple years later, but they started out. Some of the legacy products, one of the biggest ones was quinoa. And so, anyway, they started the company in France, again, focused on helping these farmers. And then they decided they had partners in France, and they decided that Edward and Matthew decided they would come to the US and open up the US market. So they came to San Francisco and they tried to open up the US market, and they quickly realized that, in order to open the US market, you need money. And so they started doing a number of fundraising, Series A, Series B. But when they did that, they contacted the Europeans and said, hey, do you want to be part of this? And from the way I understand it, they said, no, let's separate the two companies. We'll run France, you run the US, and you guys do what you do. And so that's how it continues to operate today. It's two separate companies. Alter Eco is the number 2 organic chocolate in France. We're the number 3 organic chocolate in the US. And if you look at just dark chocolate, which that's all we do, we're actually the number 1 dark chocolate brand in the US, organic. So anyway, they built the company up in San Francisco, started opening up the natural foods channel. That was where their major focus was. And, started out in the Western region of Whole Foods, got into natural grocers, opened up some of the local markets like Rainbow and Berkeley Bowl and PCC in the Northwest. And the products are amazing. They're manufactured in Switzerland. They're phenomenal flavors. The Swiss been making premium chocolate for 400 years. They know what they're doing. And so they just kept growing. And in 2014, I believe it was, they needed additional capital to grow. And so this time they went the institutional route. And so they met this group out of San Francisco called Next World Evergreen. That's a private equity group out of San Francisco. And you can kind of surmise by the name Evergreen that it's an evergreen fund. They're not focused on flipping the companies that they own, but they focus on investing in impact-driven companies. And so it was a perfect marriage for Alter Eco. They went in and invested in 2014 in a minority position. And then in 2017, they took full ownership of Alter Eco. And Edward and Matthew stepped out. They went and did other things. They're still active in the regenerative and climate emissions focused companies. They're back, I think both of them are back in France now, I believe. I see them every now and then at trade shows, and they're part of the OSC network, One Step Closer. So, but I met Next World Evergreen. I met the partners at Next World through some trade shows where we crossed paths. And given my background, they asked me if I would be interested in being an advisor to Next World, to the fund, because they had a lot of food and beverage companies. They're the owners of Smith Tea Makers up in Portland. They have big investments in San Bazan, acai bowls, and they owned Alter Eco. So I joined Next World as an advisor, and that meant I had monthly meetings and quarterly meetings with the portfolio companies. Fast forward to about 2020, and they asked me to join the board of Alter Eco. And so I became an independent board member for Alter Eco. And unfortunately, Alter Eco, like a lot of natural foods companies, especially those that are impact driven, had never really been profitable. And they were constantly fundraising, and they always had this path to profitability, but they never really got there. And so as a board member, part of my job was to try to help them figure out a way to get to profitability. And I kept making a lot of recommendations, and some of them stuck, some of them didn't, some of them didn't get executed at all. And so it was they never turned the corner. And so then we get to 2023, and Next World decided, okay, we're going to sell the company. We can't figure out how to get it over this hurdle, and we can't keep putting money in it, so we're going to sell it. So when they did that, I raised my hand and said, well, I'd like to buy it. And they said, okay. And so we negotiated for a little bit, agreed on a price. And I said, okay, now I got to go find the money, because I didn't have that kind of money. And so I met the guys in Houston that we formed a group called Trek One Capital. And we bought the company, closed the deal on December 22nd, 2023. And in 2024, we became profitable.
Wow. What was the mantra?
There were a number of things. One of the most obvious ones, and one that I had been advocating for a few years, was just logistics and transportation. So I understand when you start up a company, you build your network around you, both professionally and geographically. And so Alter Eco started in San Francisco, and they built a relationship with a third party logistics provider in the Bay Area in Oakland. Remember, I said all of our chocolates are manufactured in Switzerland. So they were bringing them through the Panama Canal around to Oakland. And then as the business had grown, 60% of the sales were on the East Coast. And I'm like, guys, this doesn't make any sense. We need to move our warehouse. Yeah, you're right. Well, maybe we should have one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. Well, no, we're not big enough to do that because you have to have double inventory. You're not good enough at planning to do that, honestly. Let's put one in the Midwest so we can service both markets. And it just never got off the ground. So I took over as the CEO in September of 23 because we knew we were going to execute this acquisition. And on January 1st of 24, we moved our warehouse to Columbus, Ohio. Plus, it shortened the lead time of getting our product from Switzerland to the US by almost 20 days. And when you've got a product that's got a shelf life, 20 days is a lot.
That's an amazing insight. So was it all logistics or was it more that needed to be
No,
done?
there were a lot of levers to pull. Resources, just manpower. I mean, it was California based, so you can imagine the salaries were pretty significant. And there was a lot of buildup of the company in terms of employees betting on the growth, and so, I mean, they had a huge marketing team in internal marketing. They had social media. They had three salespeople that were really great people, great relationships, but three's not enough. And they weren't focused on growing in the conventional channel. So really, they were more of account managers for the big natural channel. I looked at it and said, okay, what resources do we absolutely have to have in-house? Okay, we have to have customer management, order management in-house. We have to have somebody managing our logistics and the movement of the products in-house. We have to have somebody that's managing the relationships with our contract manufacturers and owning the operations side of the business in-house. And we have to have sales support in-house, but we don't necessarily have to have sales in-house. And we don't have to have marketing in-house. And we don't have to have QA in-house. We rely on our contract manufacturers for most of the QA. Now, when we go through an audit, yes, we need support. When we go through packaging changes, yes, we need to make some of those decisions on our own. But our QA person, she wanted to actually start her own consulting company, so we became her first client. I outsourced marketing. We've got a great marketing director, but she's fractional. I don't necessarily need somebody full-time. We're not a big multinational brand that's running campaigns all the time. So we reduced from 26 full-time employees to 5.
Whoa. You definitely won the popularity contest.
It's funny. We did it in a way that was very humane, very, very supportive of the people that were leaving. And all of them have landed as good or better jobs somewhere else, and mostly still within the industry. Then the third thing was really managing trade spend. Trade spend can get way out of hand with consumer packaged goods, and the retailers will push and push and push and push and push for more and more and more every trade spend, every promotion calendar. And I mentioned our truffles earlier. So we sell about 20 million truffles a year. They're mostly impulse. They're sitting at the check stand. People pick them up when they check out. It's 99 cents or 89 cents in some stores. And we were running promotions on them all the time. And the retailer would mark them down to 79 cents or 75 cents. But when I looked at the increase in sales, didn't provide any lift. We were just giving the retailer 25 cents every time they sold one on sale for nothing. We didn't get any lift. So we don't promote truffles anymore at all, ever. And I scaled back promotions on other things. We've got products that fly off the shelf every day. I don't need to promote those. So we cut trade spend by about 5%, and that 5% dropped straight to the bottom line. Those were really the three major changes we made. We did some SKU rationalization. It's great to have 50 different flavors, but 20% of your product is going to deliver 80% of your sales. And so we just went through and killed a bunch of products that didn't work. We were in 2023, we liquidated, and I wasn't running the company for the most part of that time, but we liquidated about $700,000 worth of inventory, meaning that we sold it to Grocery Outlet or TJ Maxx or some discounters. We didn't necessarily lose money on it, but we didn't make any money either. And the reason we had to do that was because the minimum order quantities from our manufacturers was such that, we were running out of shelf life with these and we had to liquidate them. In 2024, we liquidated $80,000 worth, roughly 10% of what we had done the year before, because we got rid of poor performers and because we did a better job of production planning.
Yeah, there is a reason why there are turnaround specialists. I can hear that. I'm glad you didn't cut down on packaging. What made you hold on to that?
We didn't change our ethos at all. Alter Eco stands on three core principles. We stand for restoring ecosystems, hence the name. We help farmers try to convert to regenerative farming, or as in our case, dynamic agroforestry, and we still support that. Improving livelihoods. Our chocolate is Fair for Life certified, so we're paying a premium above the market. And with cacao prices going where they did, that's been difficult to do, but we've still been able to pull it off. And then reducing waste. And so those are the three core principles of the company, and we won't change our brand DNA, the ethos of what we stand for. And so, we're even improving that. So, excuse me, we've been B Corp certified since 2009, one of the early adopters. We've been climate neutral since 2010. And in 2024, we became plastic neutral. Our granola is actually in plastic, but it's post-consumer recycled plastic. We haven't found a product yet that gives us the integrity that we need in the product and the shelf life. Our granola is sweetened with fruit as opposed to sugar. Fruit will go rancid quicker than sugar will. But our granola is healthier and it's better for you. And it has 3 or 4 grams of sugar per serving versus 8 to 12 most of the competitors have. So at this point, we're still using plastic. But we became plastic neutral certified by partnering with a group called Repurpose Global, and we're collecting plastics out of hotspots, around the world and recycling it. And we're continuing to support our farmers in conversions to dynamic agroforestry. We're doing a project in Dominican Republic right now, helping farmers plant coconut trees, not cacao plants, but that ecosystem of coconut trees, plantains, cacao plants, passion fruit vines, lime trees, that all works together to provide shade for the cacao plants. The deeper roots help bring up more groundwater. You get the organic matter from those plants into the soil. It nurtures the soil. And at the end of the day, you get a better cacao plant. And you get a cash crop for the farmer, which improves their livelihoods. So, we won't stray away from who we are.
That's so good to hear because it's so easy to lose track when you're under pressure. And it's good to hear that there are certain core principles that you refuse to move from. And just so that Repurpose has been on the show. Svanika is a friend, and Aditya and that gang is really really cool people and what they're doing. So
We love
so
working.
yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad that you're working with them. I'm going to send her a little text saying that we just talked about you, and that's wonderful to hear. Just in terms of let's keep with packaging.
Mhm.
You mentioned one of the challenges with granola and the sweetener.
Mhm.
Let's go back to the chocolates and the truffles. What are
Mhm.
the challenges you face there in order to get the right shelf life and the right integrity for the product? Because that again is not a short shelf life product. So how do you manage that whole packaging chain?
Well, we only get a year out of it. With plastic, we could get more, but we're pretty good at forecasting and we turn our truffles so fast. So they sell out so quickly. I mean, I just did some analysis and in some of our retailers they have all six flavors of our truffles at the checkout counter and they're averaging selling 25 to 30 truffles of every flavor every week. So it turns so quickly. I don't worry too much about our shelf life. But we could get a longer shelf life if we used plastic, but we won't do that. And we worked with our packaging suppliers for a couple of years before we got a NatureFlex product that we felt was really sufficient. It's not only the shelf life, it's the operability of the packaging as well. Because if it's too thin, it won't go through the machines properly. It'll tear. It doesn't work well. And our truffles have that twist on both sides, and so it has to twist and hold so that it doesn't come open again. And so, I mean, there was a lot of operational tests to confirm that the packaging would work once we found something that gave us the shelf life and the integrity. So it was a collaboration for sure.
What about your chocolate bars? They seem to be pretty, at least from the outside, it seems to be pretty sustainably packed.
It is. The foil around the bar itself is recyclable. It's not compostable.
Yeah,
The packaging, the outside packaging is paper. It's compostable.
yeah, yeah. And what is the kind of shelf life you need there?
The minimum shelf life we have on our bars is about 14 months, and we have some. That really depends on the product.
Okay,
Um, so our 100% total blackout, which is our number one seller in the natural channel,
yeah.
actually has a 3-year shelf life
And is
because
that because of the
it's
cocoa
pure cacao.
content? Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It doesn't have anything else in it. Once you introduce inclusions, fruit, or in the case of our salted caramel and things like that, milk products, you shorten your shelf life.
yeah.
And but I mean, everything's processed in a way that it we get about, I think the shortest shelf life product we have in bars is 14 months, and we get about
Okay.
13 months out of our granola.
Okay. And when I speak to, and of course, a lot of the chocolate suppliers that the chocolate makers that we are speaking to are actually emulsifier based. There is the Biggies, the Mars, the Nestlés of the
Hmm.
world, and there's very little cacao. But the challenge that we face in the regenerative packaging world is that there is the demand that is put in front of us is the same as they're getting in the multi-layered poly
Right.
structures. So we are talking about less than, and this is also high, but less than one WVTR and maybe less than at least five OTR is the absolute demand. And sometimes it could be down to zero point 0.5 WVTR. Educate us on how important is that? Is it really that stickiness or it's just because they are used to getting that from their packaging? How does one convince them that there is an alternate or it is not convincible?
I don't think they are convincible. The big guys aren't going to change. I mean, I talk about our truffles all the time because, like I said, we're the only manufacturer that has the backyard compostable, not industrial compostable, backyard compostable truffle wrapper. Well, we're not the largest truffle producer in the world. Everybody knows who the largest truffle producer in the world is. It's Lindt. Lindt produces probably 100 times more truffles than we do, maybe 1,000 times more truffles. I don't know, but they won't convert. That extra cent and a half or 2 cents per package, they're not going to do it. It's about money, and it's not about the sustainability and the commitment. It's about money. And so I don't think they will convert. I don't think you can convince them until the compostable packaging becomes at parity with everything else, then they're not going to convert. And even then, like I said, there's operational issues. Our
True.
truffles
Conversion
run
issues.
our truffles run slower than something that would be wrapped with plastic because of the integrity of the packaging. We have to run them slower. If we were wrapping them in plastic, it run like a tea bag machine, 400 a minute or whatever. But there's operational issues, and conversion would be really, really expensive for these companies. And the question is, what's the benefit? I mean, is the consumer going to? It's funny. We talk about this a lot. And when I brought in our new marketing director, first question she asked me was, describe to me alter eco in one word. And I'm like, I I don't know, organic. She's like, no, no. I said, regenerative? No. Oh God, no, 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 no. And I said, well, it's delicious. She's like, okay, why do I buy chocolate? I don't buy chocolate because it's regenerative. I don't buy it necessarily because it's organic. That might have some influence on my buying decisions, but I buy chocolate because it's an indulgent and it better tastes good. And I said, well, ours is delicious. She's like, well, then that's what we need to lead with. She said, now, once you bite into an alter eco chocolate and you taste truly how delicious it is, then we can tell the consumer about all the good things that we do. We can tell them, oh, we support the farmers and we're regenerative and we're compostable packaging and we're organic and we're Fair for Life certified and we're B Corp and we're climate neutral and we're plastic neutral. We get to tell them all of those things, but we don't lead with that, because if we lead with that, that's not why people buy chocolate.
That is a smart woman. Bring it
She's,
down to
she's,
what is the
she's,
reason?
she's really good. And we grew 20% last year. The chocolate industry did not grow that much. It grew single digits, around 4 to 5%. I've had people ask me, well, what did you guys do different? And what we did different was we got our story out there. We started telling the story about what is alter eco. Oh, we're the most delicious chocolate in the world. Well, why are you the most delicious chocolate in the world? Well, we're made by the Swiss. The Swiss make delicious chocolate. Oh, well, that's great. Okay. Oh, and by the way, we're the most sustainable chocolate in the world. We're the cleanest, greenest chocolate on the planet. I'd put our products up against anybody. My packaging graphics person says, you can't go get any more certifications. I don't have any place to put them on the package.
Love it. And you're healthier.
Yeah.
That might sell too, because
Yeah.
of course, people are concerned about, they want to have chocolate, but they are concerned about the sugars and the health and all that kind of
Absolutely.
thing. So tell me,
Absolutely.
Keith, again, staying with the packaging idea, what is the cost compromise that you really make? Like if you were to shift to a poly-oriented truffle wrap or a non-recyclable, flexible, multi-layered pack, what
Mhm.
would you save? What would it be? Whichever figure you want to take it per piece or
Yeah.
in
I mean,
total.
it really is cents per item. I mean, it's probably 2 to 3 cents per truffle, maybe 1.5 to 3 cents per truffle wrapper. It's probably, I don't know, 3 to 5 cents. I don't really evaluate it because we won't ever go there. So
Might
I,
sell
I
might like
don't really
that.
I don't really know what the difference is, because it's just not something we're going to do. So
And what about a bar of chocolate? What is it that keeps you from making that completely backyard compostable? Is that just that the product is not available, or is it because the requirements are much, much stringent?
yeah, I mean, the requirements are a little more difficult. Plus, the operations side of it, it would require some conversions with our manufacturing partner. We're not a big enough part of their business to ask them to make that conversion, and so some of it is limited from an operations perspective.
You are in a relatively busy space today. Like I see the huge chocolates and I see Lily's and I see
Mhm.
Dr. Bronner now. They have good chocolates too. And I always think of soap, which is not the best association when I'm eating chocolate, but but they're there. And when I'm looking at, say, a company like Hue, I don't know if I would assume that they'll be similar size or maybe even smaller than you. I don't know,
Well, no,
but
they're bigger than we are.
they're bigger. Okay,
Yeah, they're quite a
but
bit bigger actually.
they claim to have their chocolates in 100% compostable pack, and it's a paper and
Mhm.
aluminum kind of substrate. So how are they able to do it? Is that not possible for Alter Eco?
It would be. I mean, we could do something similar. Again, our manufacturer is not set up to do that, and so it would require a change in manufacturing or conversion of one of their lines to be able to do that. And Hue has a lot of money behind them as well. I mean, they're owned by Mondelez,
For
so
now, yes. Yeah, that's true. What about the properties that are absolutely essential for you? I know that there is water vapor barrier, there is oxygen barrier, seal strength. What are the key properties that you just cannot compromise when it comes to a chocolate bar?
well, it's really oxygen is the primary factor. I mean, of course, temperature, but that has nothing to do with the packaging. We just have to ship everything cold chain. It's always refrigerated when it moves. But it's really the oxygen barrier. We don't use a lot of flavors in our chocolate. We're mostly natural ingredients, and so you don't worry so much about the escape of the aromas or the flavors. So it's really the oxygen barrier that we have to focus on because chocolate will oxidize. It turns white, kind of gets a white coating on it.
And the water vapor barrier is not as important, like fungal growth or something like that. Would that
No,
happen if there was?
no, not
No,
not so
it's
much.
more oxygen.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's usually cold sealed, right? Not hot sealed.
Yes, correct.
So let's go to your granola now. So
Hmm.
again, what is it there that, is the barrier again so high that it's difficult for you to find a product? Because you seem to be very clear on your kind of ethics, right? That
Hmm.
I am going to, of course, you can't spoil the product for the sake of packaging because that'll
Right.
be a bigger damage to the ecology. But but you seem to be very clear on that. So is that something again that has such a high demand on barriers that it's just not possible to get, or is it the supply chain?
There are products that will support the granola packaging. For us on granola, it's doing shelf life testing, confirming that we've got the proper barrier. Again, we use fruit as opposed to sugar. Oats also will, they require a pretty good barrier from moisture content, just in the air. I mean, they'll become stale, if you will. But there are products out there. We have been working with a couple of manufacturers to test some current products that they have available. We haven't completed those tests, but that is a result of price too. They are significantly more expensive in a full pouch like that, a stand-up gusseted bag. And so, I mean, we do have to also consider price as we're going down these paths. It would require us to do a pretty significant price increase if we incorporated that into our granola today. Again, we're continuing to work with manufacturers to packaging manufacturers to try to find something that's going to work. But at this point, and that is affordable. We're willing to pay a premium, 10, 15%, but double is a little out of the question at this point.
Yeah, and you're in a competitive market. So
Very
unless everybody
competitive.
was to shift at the same time, then it would be neutral in terms of the impact. What about product? What about there being transparency in the packaging, especially in case of granola? How important is that for you? Or it's all right. People maybe don't see the granola inside and it's okay. How important is that?
We think it's pretty important to have a window into the packaging. We our products are well produced. It's nice big chunks, and we think it's important for the customer to see that.
Yeah, good to know that. And I asked that also because I know that a lot of the listeners would be producers of packaging. So at least, that's an absolute that, you want it there to
Mhm.
be a window, if not the whole thing being transparent. So of course, I'm fascinated with the idea of Alter Eco focusing on carbon neutrality. That's a high bar. So why take that up? And of course, delicious is the most important part, and then you're adding more and more kind of challenges for yourself. How did that come about, and how difficult is it in a chain like yours, where there is things happening in different area, and there is cocoa growing somewhere else, and you're moving stuff, and yeah. So how did that transpire, and how do you really go about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the original Edward and Matthew, they set out to try to be as friendly to the planet as possible. And like I said, they achieved carbon neutrality in 2010. So it was way before I was involved. Um, we reduced our carbon emissions in 2024 by almost 50% by changing our logistics and our warehouse. So we don't move product by truck hardly anymore. Our products are produced in Switzerland. They get on a barge and go up the Rhine River to Antwerp. They come to Norfolk, Virginia, and they get put on a rail car and they go to Columbus, Ohio, and they move about 10 miles by truck. And so we significantly reduced our carbon emissions in terms of moving the product. We have just continued to maintain that because we believe it's the right thing to do. I mean, do we have to be climate neutral? No. Carbon neutral? No. But we believe it's the right thing to do. Again, our ethos is leaving the planet better than we found it. And so that's what we're trying to do in every way, shape, or form. And by planting timber trees, plantain trees, coconut trees, we're reducing carbon emissions because those trees suck up carbon out of the environment.
That's absolutely beautiful to hear. I'm going to switch gears, and of course, you talked a little bit about funding and forming Trek One Capital. And when we see that company, the Trek One Capital, and of course, now I realize it's part of your kind of building this idea that you want to be part of this company and buying it out. It only has two companies as far as I see. So, are you looking to invest more in the future? And what
We
is the
are.
plan with Trek One Capital? And what are you looking for? What is the kind of companies that you're looking for?
We're looking in this better for you, healthier snacking space, if you will. We have kind of a investment thesis around building other brands around Alter Eco, not necessarily in the same chocolate space, in confectionery, but in snacking that are healthier, better for you snacking companies. And we're raising a fund to be able to invest in those types of companies.
And how much does cocoa price affect you? Because I know that that's been crazy, right? Last
Yeah.
year was like it skyrocketed, and the Ghana had a problem, and then you're also turning the company profitable at such a time. So
Yeah.
how has that impacted you? Does do the manufacturers in Switzerland have to increase prices because
Oh,
their
yeah.
main
Yeah.
ingredient is
I,
changed?
I,
So how do you manage that whole, movement
well,
and commodity?
everybody's had to increase prices. I mean, everybody, all the chocolate manufacturers increased prices last year. We did as well. We all increased prices again this year because they didn't come back down. The biggest thing we're facing right now is the tariffs and the uncertainty, and well, maybe not uncertainty now because today's August 1st and the tariffs were announced this morning, and Switzerland's getting a 39% tariff. And I can't absorb 39%. So, and we have a price increase going into effect in September, but that was based on cacao prices and estimating maybe an additional 10% tariff, not 40%.
So of course it's day one. I
Yeah,
also heard that he may be postponing it again for a week or something like that. But again, that just increases uncertainty, right? Like,
right.
come on, let's get on with it. Okay, if you're going to charge 39, let's start working on it. So
Yeah,
what are you going to do? Are you going to find alternative sources, or because 39%, it is a busy space. I know that,
it
Alter
is.
Ego has created its own niche, but there are a lot of people, and at least I am personally, I love your kind of chocolate, but I'd find myself each time I'm in that shelf in natural grocers, I look which one is having a promotion, right?
Sure.
So if it's Alter Eco, I'll say, okay, it's at 339 today. Let me see which flavors I want, and I'll stack up. Or if it's Hue, okay, that's a great chocolate too. So let me do
Mhm.
Hue right now. So how much do promotions matter, and they might even damage your balance sheet and your profit and loss account? And then how would you mitigate this 39%? And I'm talking to you on day one, so
Yeah.
maybe it's not as clear, but I'll
Well,
still
I,
love to
I
hear
don't
your
have an answer
initial.
on I don't have an answer on that one yet. I've had a few conversations with our team already this morning, but we don't have an answer. I mean, we have some strategies, but nothing that we're ready to share. In terms of promotions, chocolate is a very promoted category, and there are a lot of consumers that only buy on promotion. You mentioned Hugh a couple of times, and like I said, Hugh has the backing of Mondelez, and so it's a small part of their portfolio, so they can actually promote quite regularly, and they sell a very high percentage of their products on promotion. They're higher priced than we are to start with, and so they have a little more flexibility. And they also did a shrinkflation type of pull. So they shrunk the size of their bar. They used to be 80 grams like we are. Now they're 60 grams, and they're still more expensive than we are. So they can get away with promotions more so than we can. But it is a promoted category. I would say on average, probably about 40% of all the sales happen on promotion.
And there must be the CAGR of growth in this segment must be really strong, because at least I see a lot of people shifting more and more to healthy choices. And I think Auto Eco fits really well there. Are you seeing a growth pattern overall? And I guess there's a decent trend year on year.
It is. I mean, it's about 6% in the
That's
natural
not that
channel.
high.
In the
Yeah.
natural channel, in the conventional channel, it's higher than that.
Okay.
But the conventional channel doesn't have a big, broad offering. So you'll find Hue in a lot of the conventional markets because Mondelez uses their distribution power to get it in there. You'll find Lily's in there as well. Lily's is owned by Hershey's. So the big boys have a little more distribution, not a little, a lot more distribution power than we do. And so therefore they can get into some of the retailers where we struggled to get into. But we're making inroads. We're in quite a few conventional retailers at this point. And the growth in the natural chocolates, organic chocolates, is much higher in the conventional space. It's in the 15 to 18% range.
Yeah, that's what I would imagine. So apart from the tariffs, what are your biggest challenges right now?
Supply is becoming, critical as well. I mean, we have good relationships with our farmers and our cooperatives that we buy from, and they go back for a couple of decades. And so we've been pretty fortunate to be able to maintain supply. But as the market becomes more and more challenging because of yields out of Africa primarily, the big guys are coming into our space and buying, and they can afford to pay more than we do, and they are willing to work, directly with the farmers, pay cash up front, things like that. The other thing is, and it's related to the tariffs in some way, is the strength of the dollar. The dollar is weakening against every other currency around the world now. And so buying out of Latin America, paying the Swiss manufacturers, our dollar doesn't go nearly as far as it did, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 9 months ago.
If we gaze into a crystal ball and look 5 years hence, and of course, parking the current worries on the side, what would that vision look like for you? That okay, I'm running Alter Eco and I want, this is my aspiration. This is what I want to reach in the next 5 years.
I mean, we're pushing hard to get into the conventional market. We believe that Alter Eco has a place, or deserves a place, on the shelf at Target. We believe it deserves a place on the shelf at Kroger. we believe it deserves a place on the shelf at Albertsons and Safeway, the big guys. And we believe that we're differentiated enough and have a different taste profile enough that the consumers will embrace that once we get the opportunity to get on those shelves.
For your kind of category, how important is online sales?
Not that huge. Chocolate doesn't ship well any time of the year. In the cold, it'll bloom, it'll oxidize when it goes from extreme cold to heat inside. And in the summer, obviously it melts. And so we have to ship everything from usually around the 1st of April to the end of October with ice packs. And so it's very expensive to ship.
Amazing. Yeah, these are intricacies sometimes we as consumers don't understand. It's more complicated than what it seems. Okay, all good things have to come to a close, Keith. So my last question, what does good garbage mean to you?
Well, I had not heard of your organization before, and when I was talking with our PR team, they were telling me about you, and I did a little bit of research, and I think you're doing a great job at just spreading educating the consumers on what it takes to actually make products, what it takes to support sustainability, what it takes to support regenerative, and waste management. I mean, that's a big part of what we're focused on. So I think you're doing a great job of spreading the news.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being on the show. I can tell you this much, that I'm deeply influenced with what you're doing, and at least you're going to get a lot of my dollars eating Alter Eco, products. And I hope, a lot of people who are listening to the show are also going to, be influenced by the kind of strong sense of ethics that the company holds and the effort that you guys are trying to make in terms of making a difference. So thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.